All right. I'm Michael Black,
Why are you on the panel?
and I'm on the panel because co-op board games fascinate me. I'm a newbie to it. I think that's about it.
My name is Carrie Patel. I'm a narrative designer at Obsidian Entertainment, and so through my job there, I've gotten introduced to a lot of awesome, exciting board games and video games that have co-op elements. I'm also a writer, and my first book, The Buried Life, comes out with Angry Robot on July 29th.
I'm Craig Finseth. My goal in being here is I don't like winning or losing with who I'm playing with. I want to have us both win, or all of us win, or all of us. So, but I don't know which games do that well, and so I'm hoping to learn from all of you, and which ones I should go buy.
My name is Dave Benhart. I have been playing games for many, I don't know, way too long. And co-op games are, to me, I enjoy pretty much all forms, and co-op games are a fairly new and really interesting form that I don't know, like talk about them. So,
Okay.
and yeah, I want to learn more games.
So, if anybody have anything they want to start off with a spiel, or just open it to questions, or
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I just everyone had so many credentials on their name. I wanted to mention that. I mean, I'm a YouTube sort of critic reviewer, so I do that as well. Sorry.
I brought actually the oldest fully co-op game I know. You can't buy it anymore because I bought it 20 years ago. It is based off the movie. There is some fun elements, but there's basically it's the Marines against the aliens. There are some not great elements in it in that each person would play a different Marine or two or three Marines, and when your Marines die off, because it's going to happen, you're out of the game. And so it has that elimination element, which is not typical in most co-op games, especially newer co-op games. You won't see that in a Pandemic, for example. But it's, as far as I know, that's the oldest one I know, outside of, say, two-player solitaire or something like that.
There are a few kind of dumb ecology games that go back a bit earlier. Sure. Save the Whales.
Right. This came out in the late 80s. I got it in 94, and it was out of print then. I got it at Gen Con. They said, we have like 5 left or something, I don't know, 50, they had what they had there, so.
well, my first experience was with Lord of the Rings, probably, which was fun. We didn't win quite as often as I would have liked, and eventually got discouraged because I think in a whole bunch of attempts we only managed to win once. I mean, some of the times they're so hard that, what's the fun of playing it if you know you're going to get killed all the time? I don't know. But then,
Rings. Oh dear.
well, I'm just saying my experience.
Yeah.
We've got Pandemic and love it. And then there's other ones like Forbidden Island. And Arkham Horror has you can play it as one person against the game, although we've never actually figured out the rules enough to play it at all.
The base game of Arkham Horror is not that bad. I mean, it's
The
FFG rules, so it's poorly written. But
Yeah, I know. It's like, eventually we'll track down a rule book. Someone must have rewritten the rule book so you can find out what the rules really are, how you're supposed to play it. That's not a problem with that one. But I'm looking for more ideas, and which ones are out there and good and worth spending $50-$60 on.
Like a lot of people, one of my first gaming experiences was with the original Super Mario Brothers, and of course back then 2-player meant Mario pauses Luigi over a hole, and then Luigi falls, and then Mario gets to play again. So, true story. So I was really excited, and I know this is a little bit older, but when the new Super Mario Brothers Wii game came out, and that's honestly still one of my favorite co-op video games, just because it had all the fun platforming of all the original Mario games. But adding, and you were all on the same screen, so you didn't have to worry about shrinking your screen, split screen displays. But at the same time, you added both, new challenges and new benefits when you got more people playing, because you could sort of, bounce off of each other, but at the same time, there are a lot of portions where, crowding the screen makes things very tricky. And so you kind of have to cooperate with the people playing with you to decide, okay, when are we going to kind of bubble up and let you do this hard part? Okay, now you save me, and now you can bubble up and get over here. So there's a lot of coordination that, as long as you're patient with each other, it's a lot of fun.
I think, again, like what Craig
Yeah.
was saying, when I play a competitive board game, like anything from Monopoly to anything else, there's typically a lot of hostility involved. Not only hostility, but again, that element of if you lose, then you're out of the game and you can't play and you have to watch other people. And especially coming into a game, it's difficult to learn the rules when you're being excluded in that way. So co-op games for me are really just, they're very fun. You can brainstorm with your friends, improve your friendship, etc., stuff like that. And they're far more easygoing to play, and you can enjoy a game with a simple rule set without having to feel like you have to win.
Simple rule set?
Yeah, like, I mean, a lot of the games that I've played have had simple rule sets in terms of the board games, like Pandemic.
Pandemic is, I love Pandemic. And yeah, it's relative, but I mean, something like Arkham Horror, especially when you add in more than one expansion, it gets really complicated and really long and huge.
I mean, like I said,
and Arkham Horror do not belong in the same room.
Right, well.
Much less the same sentence.
I think Eldritch Horror is actually fairly similar to Arkham Horror, but a good bit simpler. So I've heard a lot of people say that they
I've heard good
prefer
things
that
about it.
one.
I have not actually played Eldritch Horror, but I've heard really good things about it.
I think one thing that's really cool about both of those is the horror setting. I feel like horror and cooperative play go really well together because you just start feeling that much more like you're depending on your teammates and like they're depending on you, which is really rewarding for co-op play.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't see which, we'll start with you and then go to you.
I was going to mention Eldritch Horror because it is very good. And I was going to ask you on the subject of competitive gameplay versus cooperative gameplay. I agree that a lot of times I enjoy playing with my friends, not necessarily against my friends. But sometimes, like when we will play Eldritch Horror, for example, there does tend to be a little bit of not even so much the alpha gamer mentality where there's one person going, oh, you should do this, you should go do that, and kind of directing things, but just one person will start to acquire some items, acquire some weapons, and become a better part of the team, and then when there are those tough challenges in the game, like you get an epic monster out on the board, it's like, oh, we better have this person go and do it. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on not competitiveness, but individual challenge within a cooperative game?
That's definitely one of the problems that can come up in some co-ops, especially something like Arkham Horror, where you're each playing a character that advances and grows because you can get better, not equally.
Power-ups.
Yeah, yeah.
In a word.
Whereas if you compare that to something like Pandemic, where every character has a different ability and nobody's ability gets any better necessarily. You all start out basically the same, and you're just trying to beat the randomness of the deck in a way, the way that deck gets stacked that time. The other problem you do run into is one person will line up, you should do this and you should do that and we do that, and then that person can just be playing by themselves, which granted I have done because you can. What's the difference between running one character and 4 when you play Pandemic? It's it's not that complicated.
I mean, if one person dominates and says, do this, do this, do this, it's probably no fun for the other people.
Yeah.
But sometimes one person does have a better understanding, and if they say, and if you explain your thinking to each other, well, if you do this, then that might happen, and this, maybe we should do that. And I don't want to say a teacher, but if you talk through your thinking, then everybody benefits because they all learn.
Yep.
And can be better players, and that sort of is it. But that's also the mix of people you happen to have. If you get a dominant person, that you're going to be dominant no matter what they do, and that's a different problem.
I think it's also a really nice feature that some games have where each role has very specific strengths. Each player's role has specific strengths that are not replicated by the roles any other players have. So one I've enjoyed recently is Forbidden Desert, which is the sequel to Forbidden Island. And it's really great because there are different roles, like water carrier, there's a climber, but they're all good at different things, and they're all good at different obstacles. And so, the water carrier can carry more water, which, helps everybody survive. And, certain characters can bypass the obstacles that build up over time. Certain characters can move a little bit faster or farther. And so I think something like that helps ensure that nobody becomes superfluous, and that every player has something to contribute, that nobody else can end up doing for them.
Another game that I like in that way is, and I've forgotten the full name of it, it's a Japanese themed Ghost, and I've played it with you actually, it's probably like 4 or 5 years ago. Not Ghost Hunter.
Ghost Stories.
Ghost Stories, yep. Really, really hard. Really challenging.
I agree.
But a
That's a
lot of
tough
fun.
one.
I think I've only beaten it once, maybe. But a lot of fun. Ghost Stories is a fun one. And everybody has different powers, since nobody can get really too much stronger than anybody else as you can play.
Person in the gray there was up first, then we'll get to you, Brown.
I was just wondering, you guys have mentioned Arkham Horror an awful lot. Have any of you played Elder Sign, and
Yes.
what are your thoughts of the two games?
Elder Sign, otherwise known as Kathatsi, because really it's a lot of dice rolling.
Yeah.
It is really kind of easy to me, just base Elder Sign. It's not that challenging to beat. There are some interesting aspects to it, and when you add the expansion, it definitely gets tougher. I do enjoy it. I mean, it's a good, nice game that doesn't take nearly as long, an hour or so. It's a fun game, but
So,
Whenever I explain
you
it to
mentioned
somebody, I
it's
always-
Kathatsi. But how does it, give me 2
It's-
sentences how it differs.
well, okay, so you get challenges in different rooms, and you roll dice trying to match enough symbols on the dice to meet each room's challenge to clear
Okay.
the room. And you get a reward, each person gets a reward for killing the room, or you at least remove a threat away for, the great old one to show up, or you get more doom tokens.
You get a choice for rooms, and different characters can handle different adventures
Right,
better.
right,
So
yep.
that's a good point on that one.
It-
But
yeah,
you're,
it's-
you're right, you need the expansion to get it tough
to
enough.
really get tough. I mean, it's play the base
Well,
game a
for
few
you-
times,
for you,
and then,
but for me,
and
it
then
might be-
and realize that But yeah, it's
Getting back to the kind of the multi-role spectrum for the game, so everybody has something special that they can do. There's a game that was recently released via Kickstarter called Myth that is kind of has that mindset where each of the 5 base classes has something that they can do that the other class can't.
Can
The other
you spell
classes
that
can't.
name?
Myth is spelled M-Y-T-H.
Oh, Myth, okay.
And it's by Mercs Games. They also do other like tabletop strategy style games, but like you have, I'm screwing up the names, but you have like a paladin archetype, you have a thief archetype, you have a ranger archetype. I mean, you have all these different character classes that just kind of play off of one another, so you can just go watch a brigand get launched and then just be blowing snot out of somebody because it was stealth and now is rolling like 4 times as many dice as it normally does. So,
You and then you.
Yeah. To go to individual characters in a cooperative game, Sentinels of the Multiverse takes it
Okay.
to as far as you can go in some ways. Each player is a different superhero, and each superhero has a different deck with different deck abilities in the cards. So the decks work differently, and they're based on the powers. And each villain does too. And for that matter, each environment where they fight has a different deck that is specialized and works in different ways in each game. So you're sort of balanced. Some characters will do better in certain environments or against certain villains than others. But everybody has a completely individual character.
We haven't heard from you yet, then you.
Actually, that kind of leads right into the question that I had over lunch. A bunch of us were watching the World Cup, and one of our table mates was saying, this game has a really, really simple rule set and practically infinite combinations. And that brings up that separate decks thing. The combinatorics is huge. If you could all comment on apparent simplicity of rule set versus experience of actual play. Like, simple rule set doesn't necessarily mean simple play.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because the one that comes to mind is Pandemic, because the first time I played Pandemic, I was like, this isn't that challenging because it's just a computer algorithm problem that you go where since the deck gets reset so much and stacked and it only gets a little bit larger, you know exactly how many cards are going to show up before a city that already has too many cubes on it's going to explode. So you know exactly what the best option is. And then as I played it more, I realized that's not, it's actually more complicated than that. Because you often have 2 or 3, and are you betting, how much do you bet that he can take his turn to get there before it comes, versus the cards I turn over have one of those cities. And because it seems really simple.
And one of the things I found with that one is that it's easier to win with fewer players. At least that's with our limited experience. When we've played with 2 people, we've tended to win a lot. When we played with 4, we almost never win because it comes back and gets you before you can actually marshal your forces and take action.
See, whereas I think with more players in Pandemic, you have a higher variety of options to do things. And so if you set them up in the right order, like if you have the dispatcher and the scientist, you don't necessarily want to, like one guy always moving before the next based on what their abilities are.
I hadn't thought of that.
If you have them reversed, it is worse.
Okay.
So, but you also get a wider variety of option. You have a higher chance of having a medic and a scientist, which is a great combination because scientist makes it easy to clear. And
I guess to follow up on the question about simple versus complex rule sets, I played a game called The Trail at House on the Hill not long ago, which is it's not purely cooperative, but most people end up cooperating, and I want to say there's some purely cooperative scenarios. But anyway, one thing that's awesome about it is that there are so many scenarios you can wind up in, but one of the things that makes it challenging is then sometimes understanding how those scenarios mesh with the regular rules. We ended up with one where we had these carnivorous plants, and there were these vine tips that were chasing us down and trying to drag us back to the the roots. And so I think there were a couple questions that came up as we were playing, like, well, what happens if a vine tip is on the elevator and the elevator's going down? Is the vine tip connected to the So it's small stuff that you can kind of work your way around one way or the other, but I think sometimes when you've got, a world of options like that, you can have trouble figuring out how those work with all the rules.
They improved it in the second printing, but the first printing, the underground lake could be in the attic.
That's a game that's not super balanced depending which scenario you end up in.
Yeah, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, the woman in green we haven't heard from, the someone in the back, then you and what?
I don't have anything.
Oh, sorry. Someone in the back there that we haven't heard from yet?
Yeah, actually 2 questions. First of all, what about competitive cooperative where you're not directly in competition, something like Zombie State, where I can't directly attack any of the other players, but I can certainly make the board less friendly for them, but the goal is for us all to win in the end. It's just the mechanics of the game put us in a position where we have to make hard decisions. And then a game like, let's say, the Dungeons and Dragons adventure game systems that are more or less a sandbox,
Like
and not an
Ravenloft.
actual game. Because that's a wonderful co-op system, but it's not a real game. It's simply a set of components where you get to run wild as a group and make your own actual games.
You mean like Castle Ravenloft?
Yeah, Castle
and
Ravenloft,
that's the only one I've played, and I mean, there's plenty of scenarios in there that are, they're cooperative games. There's some nice stuff in there, but to me, it almost seems, because of the rules around monster movement, the players can cheat the system to make it more adventure, make the game easier than I think it should be.
Actually,
But I haven't heard of Zombie State, so sorry.
Menu.
One of the games that my friends and I like to play is Shadows over Camelot, which is a cooperative game. It's not 100% purely cooperative because there's a trader mechanic that you use.
Yep.
But very similar to Pandemic, there's the different knights have different special abilities. it's your turn, you have a heroic action, and you have to advance evil, so you gotta choose.
Yep.
Put on a catapult and risk Camelot falling, or you draw from that, random
And,
deck of black
and
cards.
Shadows over Camelot and Betrayal at House on the Hill and the Game of Thrones board game from FFG, those are all start out cooperative and have trader, Battlestar Galactica to an extent, you can have a trader in the beginning, you just don't know who it is. Those are all, co-op, at least to start, and then there's one person that flips. And then it becomes, everybody against them partway through. BSG is a wonderful game. If you've never played it, it is a great game. It takes a long time.
Very hard.
It is hard, yeah.
I actually kind of wanted to touch on that. We started bringing up all of those games that have like that element where there could be a traitor. Even Arkham Horror has a card, join the winning team, that turns one of your players into a traitor if they take it. How do you feel that cooperative games that have those traitor mechanics work as far as the competitive nature? In your experience, do you feel that those games are generally less nasty when it comes to that competition, or?
Well, a game like BSG, where basically you get assigned to be the traitor, or Betrayal at House on the Hill, it's not like you have a choice, and so that to me is it's not as nasty.
Both of the games, the co-op games that I played, Pandemic and Shadows over Camelot, had that sort of, you're playing against the game, and then there's another person who's kind of trying to advance the evil side.
Yeah, if you play the bioterrorist.
If you play the bioterrorist, we never ended up using those because when we came into the co-op games, we had this mindset of like, let's have a fun time and play the game, and we're going to do this. And the one person who's a traitor or who is the bioterrorist is kind of left out of that.
Yep.
They're left out of the cooperative aspect.
From my experience, those don't have as, they're not the same sort of competitiveness in them, because you don't know who it's going to be, is going to get assigned to that other side role, as opposed to say a game like Descent Journeys in the Dark, where one person is the evil overlord and everybody else is cooperating against them from the beginning. That's a competitive game. It's just a 4-on-1 competitive game, as opposed to everyone for themselves. A traitor mechanic, a BSG, I have no choice if I'm a Cylon or not. I don't even know until the cards get dealt, and I may not be for half the game. And then I try and keep it hidden, usually.
I mean, to me, that's a third category of game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if I'm trying to play a cooperative game and I draw that card, it's like my feeling would be I want to quit because I don't want to compete again. The whole point of the game is I want to cooperate.
Yep.
And making me the traitor, all you do is ruining my fun. So it's not like it's not a valid game. I don't want to say it's perfectly legitimate. It's just not the sort of game I would want to play. And when I'm wanting to play this, I mean, I'm not saying I never want to play competitive games, but when I'm choosing to do a cooperative game, this is not what I want to see happen.
The box on the front of it has semi-cooperative as the category.
And it really is, yeah.
And as long as you know what you're doing going into it, it's not like I'm really against the concept. It's just when you're choosing to play cooperative, then you don't want to be, have someone spike that halfway through.
Well, I was just trying to see if I could do like a name for that third category.
Semi-cooperative or a trader game or something.
Yeah, trader mechanic is often used too.
There, and then
I just wanted to say real quick, going back to games that have different roles, different powers. Right now, the one that I am enjoying the very most is the Pathfinder adventure card game. Lots of different roles, lots of good stuff. But touching on the aspect of being competitive within a cooperative game, my absolute favorite board game is the Mage Knight board game, which is not a simple rule set at all, but you can play competitively or cooperatively, but even when you play cooperatively, because of the minor deck building aspects within the game, you are still competing to explore the board, get places, acquire better cards, and level up your character. And as my friends and I have played the game, I've played it solo, so I know how to do things better than my friends, and if I want to, I can just power through and take everything good But if we are playing cooperatively, we try to work together to say, okay, I'm gonna go here, you go here. So even in a game where there is that competitive aspect, you can, depending on what group you're playing with, you can sort of go one way or the other if someone wants to be a jerk or work together more.
I feel like with a lot of games, cooperative play is really an agreement between the players as much as something that's in the rule set. And yeah, you know, there are a lot of games where sure someone can dominate if they really want to, but you know, a game like Level 7 Escape, you're both, all players are I think looking for the same objective. You don't really have to play cooperatively, so you know, you can lock the door, you know, right in front of your, you know, one of the other players if it's going to keep the aliens and the, you know, the soldiers from finding you. But I feel like if you go into that knowing, well, what we want to play is a cooperative game, we help each other get to the end, you know, that's as important as, you know, whether or not the rules specifically require you to play that way.
So there's this category where you can choose to play it cooperatively or competitively almost.
Yeah, I think so.
Another one that has a sort of a legendary, the Marvel deck building game is in theory a cooperative game, and it is. It just supposedly, because all the heroes are working together, building their decks, working together to beat whoever the villain is, the big boss villain. I played it 3 or 4 times. My problem was it ended up being really easy to beat the boss. So the chance of losing as a team was minimal. But then there's this aspect in the rules of whoever does the most damage to the boss wins more. I win more than you do, which, you know, and I'm like, but I found it very interesting to have a deck building game where you're all drawing from the same pool, but you're all working together. So is it better for me to hit the boss or for me to buy that card to, you know, improve my deck? And, you know, a lot of conversation about, well, this card would be better in your deck than mine because you've got more of the Wolverines and I'm running Cable or somebody.
Yeah, along the same line, in a simple rule game, Castle Panic and Dead Panic, where you theoretically, well, you have to play it competitively or you lose. But there's theoretically a winner. However, if anybody pays a whole lot of attention to winning, they're going to destroy the whole game. The Hobbit board game as one of those also. You really got to decide who's going to go against which adventures and when. And granted, they get more gold if they do, but you have to get that thing taken care of, or Slug is going to get you. But yeah, Castle Panic is a fairly easy rule set and goes good. And you're right, Forbidden Island is a very easy rule set, maybe too good or easy, but it's a good starter. Forbidden Desert is much harder, but just as simple.
There was someone over there,
The topic of alpha players came up earlier and kind of the problems that those create. The trader games are one way that I've seen to kind of break that up a little bit. There's another way that I've seen you'll have a few real-time games. Space Alert is one of them. There are a couple others. I'm most familiar with Space Alert. And that is a great way to break up the alpha player thing. If you're not interested in being frustrated with your friends, it's not a game for you. But
Space Alert is probably my favorite co-op right now. My only problem with this, it seems like every time I play, we're teaching at least one person new, or it's been so long that we don't remember all of the rules, so we have to run through all of the training scenarios again. Because I have never actually played the game with every single rule set. Basically, you're all a crew on a spaceship that has enemies coming down from different tracks. And if you're familiar with Robo Rally and how you program your movement in Robo Rally, you do that in Space Alert. So I move here and then I go down the elevator, but if you're coming up the elevator, you crash and things happen, and which throws off everybody. But you have to do that in 10 minutes. So one person gets to listen to the audio track and say, hey, we've now got another issue coming from this side, so we got to man these guns. And you're all chaotically trying to, and one person's supposed to be the captain and giving the order. You do this, you do that, but wait, I need to be over here. And you got to keep track of the things your own doing. kept till I'm like, that's not gonna work. So it's
Interesting.
hell of a lot of fun. It takes, each scenario is 10 minutes, but like I said, usually you have to play the beginning scenarios a few times and just to, I've never gotten with the full, you've got robots to have and missiles and, you know, like 4 different types of weapons and boarding parties that can come on, and I've never gotten that far, but it's a great game. If you ever get a chance to play Space Alert, play it.
Another thing that's great about it, I think, is the sense of humor.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something else that's a lot of fun with a cooperative game. Kind of like horror on the one hand, but then humor on the other, just because it's something that's that much more enjoyable when you're playing with people.
Yeah. Well, horror and humor are sort of two sides of the same coin.
I'm so happy you mentioned Space Alert, because that's what I had my hand raised to talk about. And the other game that you can play if you want that real-time cooperative element without quite so many rules to try to remember is Escape, Curse of the Temple, which is a very simple game, and it's one that I wanted to mention when you were asking about simple rules that lead to complications, because as you're going through that game, you're rolling dice, and it is that same Yahtzee mechanic where you're trying to get what you need to complete objectives, and everyone is laying down tiles and moving through this temple and trying to roll dice, but one side of the dice will lock you out, and so then your dice all get locked down and you can't do anything, and your friend is over here on the other side of the board, and you're like, I need you to come back over here and rescue me. And it's the same thing where you have to do it all in 10 minutes. And so you're all cooperating, and it leads to just extremely tense situations with a rule set that is dirt simple, but it's a great game.
Right in the back. So,
Another game along the lines of like Space Alert and whatnot that my friends and I really enjoyed online is Artemis. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it, but Artemis is quite fantastic, and even the captain can't even do anything. He has to order somebody else to change his own screen.
Yeah.
It's a 6-player.
You can actually play it on the 22nd floor, like
very
most of the
nice.
weekend. The Manicorn Navy has been running it all weekend. Yeah, Space Alert is basically Artemis in board game form.
okay. Sir?
There was another one that came out not too long ago that is kind of the same game as Space Alert, where you're trying to command the crew in a real-time kind of environment. I think it's called Red Shirts, where...
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen that in the dealer's
I've seen it, yeah. I just have never played it.
It's more like a Munchkin type game.
There's one, there's like Space Cadet, it's got a...
Space Cadets, that's it, yeah.
Damage control.
Damage control?
Now the damage control actually, as you set up the deck, it actually then sets a time limit, depending on how big your deck is, and it gives you alerts actually every 3 minutes to reveal another card in the deck. When you get to the end of the deck, the game is over, but it is a real-time, similar to Space Alert, but you're actually, all you're doing in the game is moving from areas and grabbing tools and putting stuff together, like, okay, we need to repair the shields or the bridge or fiber control.
Well, which does anyone remember if it was Space Cadets? Or there's one where you've got like all these different like mini games.
Space Cadets.
It is Space Cadets. Okay.
Yeah.
I have one game that isn't out yet, and I've just heard announced, and there's no real rules to it. Anybody familiar with Risk Legacy? Okay. Permanently make permanent changes to the board, so every time you play, it's a slightly different game. There's apparently on its way out Pandemic Legacy, where some of the characters can be killed off, some of the characters can gain experience, become heroes, and have more powers. That's about all in permanent changes to the diseases and things that can happen on the board. That's about all the information that's out there. Don't know when it comes out. Probably next year.
Yeah, I think it might be that one, or there's another guy that actually just came out a game from Mayfair called Madtown. And I think if it's not that one, he's Legacy, there's another Pandemic he's actually working on also.
Interesting.
On that.
One game that I've only ever played once, and I don't even know if it's still in print, is called Yggdrasil.
Yeah.
It's basically the whole premise of the game is you're playing different Asgardians like Thor and Odin and whatnot, and you're defending the life tree from some of the bigger monsters. and you don't ever kill the monsters, you just kind of keep knocking them back. But eventually, there's a way to win, and I've only ever played it once. So
Yeah, I
don't
only ever
remember.
played it once. The biggest thing I remember is trying to remember all of the symbols and what they meant. And
Yeah.
You know, almost like playing Seven Wonders. What's this do again?
Yeah, because you go to all the different worlds of the life tree.
There's
And you can
only
like go to
9,
hell
I
and
can remember
recruit
them.
warriors that you can then use to fight the boss
Yep.
monster.
Yep.
You can go and get the big Asgardian weapons like Mjolnir and the spear, the Berserker spear or whatnot. And that was another really fun one that I've played. That's you against the game.
Pretty much.
Yeah, good.
But I've not ever seen it in print. I don't know
I
if it still
saw
is.
it at one of the
available. I think
stores.
Force still has it.
Yeah,
Source.
I think the source still has it. Yeah.
It's fairly easy at first level, but if you had just 1 or 2 of the advanced cards, it gets tough.
There's a game that's coming out very soon called Dead of Winter, which is by the guys who made Mice and Mystics, which is another great co-op game. And it has an interesting mechanic whereby you are all trying to help your colony survive because it's kind of post-apocalyptic. So you will have these colony objectives, but every player has a secret personal objective. And if you don't complete your personal objective by the end of the game, even if everyone else wins, you lose. And sometimes your personal objectives might be slightly at odds with what everyone else is trying to do with the colony, but it's still something that you need to get done. And in the same fashion as Shadows over Camelot, of the 13 character cards, one of them is a traitor. So there's a chance that there might be a traitor, but you might not have one, and everyone might be paranoid for no reason.
How many players is it typically?
I believe it's 2 to 4.
So the chance is pretty low, but
Yep.
I suppose you could always draw, if you wanted to make sure that you didn't have a traitor, you could just pull a card out of the deck when you dealing them out or something. But, you know, that's fine. You as players have control. You can choose to play with it or without it, and, you know, depending on what you're experiencing after that day, you know. So,
Touch of Evil by Flying Frog is another kind of similar,
yeah.
it has a similar mechanic as far as the NPCs in the game not knowing whether or not you can actually trust any of the information. As well as the idea that while there is, ultimately there can be that winner above winners, the game is so much more elegant and fun if everyone gets on board together. Otherwise, it's almost always a disaster.
and Touch of Evil is the vampire themed one, right?
Touch of Evil is kind of the, you don't know which monster. That's part of the game, is trying to figure out which monster you're looking for.
Okay.
So
Don't
it
forget
it has a
about that one.
vampire and a werewolf, had the source.
Oh, okay, so it was their second game, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, I have played that one. And that one has multiple, like in multiple scenarios where you can play cooperative or
And
competitive
then
or
a bunch
not.
of expansions as well.
Yep.
On the subject of, you know, if you guys don't want to play with the traitor, just take the traitor card out. I had wanted to ask you, and I'll use video games as an example because I feel like it's easier. Earlier you were talking about playing New Super Mario Brothers, saying, you know, okay, like, when are we going to bubble up and let one person do this part? And that is a game where it is cooperative, but it's sort of up to the players as to how cooperative you want to be, or, you know, are you going to jump on your friend's head and knock them down a hole? Versus a game like Left 4 Dead, where the mechanics of the game are very finely tuned so that if you go off by yourself and try and just be the lone wolf, you're probably gonna die. And then everyone is probably gonna die. Do you prefer games, either board games, if you're thinking of examples, or video games, where the mechanics very much direct you towards being more cooperative, or where it is more up to you as to how cooperative you want to be and making it more of a player choice?
I personally enjoy both. I mean, I play competitive games as well as cooperative games, so I like both experiences. I think the key is just knowing with your fellow players up front what kind of game you're playing, because if you're all saying, yeah, we're going to cooperate, we're going to help each other out, and then somebody starts backstabbing, then that can lead to some frustration.
I think that in the world of board games, it's way easier to choose that kind of thing. Because if you're playing Left 4 Dead or Payday, you might need a fourth to help you rob the bank, right? So you're going to have to open it up to the public, and the internet is not a forgiving place for finding cooperative, friendly people who will listen to what you say. So I think that board games are a far better place to sort of say, okay, we're going to play this cooperatively, and I know you, Joe, and I know you, Carrie, and we're going to do this way, and you all agree, and you're all friends. So in terms of what I personally like, I go either way. Although competitive board games tend to frustrate me and leave me more angry at my friends than anything else. So.
Depends on the game for me.
Oh yeah, I mean
the diplomacy is.
I'll tell you, Shadows over Camelot. Even though we were all trying to do the same thing, we were so frustrated with each other. I got a headache. I was so frustrated. We just had a bad draw.
Personally, just about the only board games that I want to play are ones where it's cooperative and you work hard together to make it achieve the thing. This is probably sacrilege to everybody in the room, in which case I apologize. But when we play Ticket to Ride, we sit down and plan out where we're going to build our trains, and it's like, well, I'm going to go on the southern part and you can be the north. Okay, and then we honor that, because it's the fun is the building, not in the backstabbing, which you can also do in that game. We just choose to never use any of those options.
That's actually a good point, because I mean, you see this sort of element arising in capitalist situations. Like, we all know that different cell phone companies own different parts of the U.S., and it's fundamentally good for them to do that because they can assign the prices. And I don't know if you guys have ever played like competitive board games in that manner, like saying, play Monopoly and say, well, I have no chance of getting Boardwalk and Park Place, so you can have them. I don't know if that's.
I don't want them.
I haven't played Monopoly in 20 years. So anyways, this is I emphasize personal choice, because I don't want to compete against my wife. I don't want us to have winners and losers in those situations. I'd rather cooperate with her, and we can jointly celebrate or jointly suffer frustration because the game won this time.
And Ticket to Ride is definitely a game that you can play friendly.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah. But it's still competitive. Do I complete my stuff before you do? So.
Or actually at the end we sort of say, well, I'll hold off on actually putting anything down until, and then we total up points, and it's like, you have 175 points and I've got 138 points. Okay, you won. Move on. The point is we both have the satisfaction of finishing building.
Yeah.
Really competitive, extremely competitive, or cooperative, but that's a personal choice, and that's fine. And then I recognize this is probably not what the originators of the game intended, and that's their problem.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, is that like something you guys enjoy doing, just playing the game? I mean, a game like Pandemic or Ticket to Ride, like just the process of playing.
It's the process of playing, and you're talking to each other, and you're communicating, and other things come up, and the fun is in the doing.
Yeah.
And not in the winning or losing.
In the destination.
Yeah. The fun is in getting there.
You mentioned video games as well, that have sort of this, could be cooperative, could be a little more competitive depending on how you play it. One video game that I played really recently that I love as a cooperative game is called Tiny Brains. Okay, getting some nods. It's fairly new, but they're basically 4 little lab mammal characters, and each has a different power, and it's a puzzle-solving game. But because you always need, I think, at least 2 characters to be acting at a particular time, there's really no way to play it there's no reason to play it competitively. You do have to cooperate, and you have to actually coordinate your actions too. You can play with just 2 people, if you're willing to kind of toggle through, each person's willing to take 2 characters and you kind of toggle through as you're going along. And it's one of the, I wish there were more, but one of the relatively few games that's actually couch co-op. So if you've got an Xbox or a PS4, you can sit next to the person you're playing, know exactly who you're playing with, and avoid the the online, who the hell is this person?
Yeah, I remember.
And plan it out.
One of the Katamari Damacies, I don't remember, had a mode where you basically had both controllers were connected to the same ball, and you had to figure out who was going to control which way. And I know they've done some speed
man,
runs.
that's gotta
There's
hurt.
the second one. You love Katamari? Yeah.
That's a little more cooperative than I think I would want.
What's the thing? And they have these speed runs going on where like each person has one button on the controller. So I saw this GoldenEye speed run. Where, like one guy aimed, one guy moved, and then I guess the guy was aiming controlled the reloading, and It's like you have to be a hive mind to actually play it that way, but they actually did it faster than one person doing
I
it
can
alone.
see if you're into that, that could be really, really cool.
Wow.
Do you guys have any particular favorite two-player co-op games? I know so many of the co-op games will be like built for 4, and we'll let you scale it down to 2 if you want, and we'll hack some stuff together. But we've found that there aren't a lot out there that really work, really breathe well for 2 players specifically. And I was wondering if you guys had any favorites.
I think Arkham Horror base game works pretty well. Pandemic works okay, and if you really want to play with 4 characters, running 2 characters isn't that hard. Beyond that, I don't know because I haven't played enough 2-player.
Forbidden Island.
Yeah, yeah.
Works fine with 2. I'm looking forward to Forbidden Desert. I haven't played it yet, but
This is also a video game, but played Lego Marvel Avengers. I don't know exactly how many, what the max is, but I've found that 2 is a great number. Because again, you can have people switch off when you need a hero with a different power, and that's another one of those games where each character who can be played has something unique that they can do, so everyone playing has the opportunity to be useful. But it does this really interesting kind of intuitive split screen thing where when the 2 characters are close together, you'll just be on the one big screen. But as you start to move apart, the screen sort of starts to split, and it almost looks like a comic book pane. But I feel like with more than 2 players, it might get a little bit hectic with so many different little nodes of screen, but 2's just about right in my opinion.
I had to bring up Army of 2.
Oh, there you go.
One game that I was thinking of when you were mentioning, competitive or co-op video games was Battle Block Theater, which is one that's in the name it kind of sounds like it wouldn't be cooperative, but it has 4-player competitive mode. You can play teams, and then it also has the couch co-op 2-player mode, which is literally you have to help each other get through these puzzle missions, to get to the end of the game and collect these gems and everything. So that's another good one for 2-player.
person in front, then middle, then last, then over there. Yeah, you.
Going back to 2-player co-op games, actually one of the best is the Lord of the Rings card game by Fantasy Flight.
That's on our list. That's one of
okay,
one of our 2, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's also like it's also a fantastic single-player game, which you don't see a lot in board games. But it's also just fantastic co-op. Does a really good job of kind of balancing how the 2 people interact by basically applying Magic the Gathering style deck building to a cooperative environment. Very interesting.
Portal 2 is fantastic, just
Which
co-op
one?
wise. Portal 2, if you're looking for a video game couch co-op, that's fantastic. I've played it through 3 or 4 times with different people, and it's still one of those things where I don't exactly remember how this puzzle works until the person and I figured through. It's lovely.
I'm very guilty about Portal 2. I feel guilty about Portal 2 because it's one of the few Steam games I have. I bought months ago and I still haven't played.
That get years for me and I still haven't played.
Do it.
I know.
In the digital
put that on a
space,
family video.
do you feel like, it seems to me that I've been seeing a lot of these games that are kind of like that Super Mario Brothers weird Left 4 Dead or stuff like that, where it has a single player mode. You can play it single player, and the single player is okay, but it's meant to be played with multiple players. Games like Monaco, Trine, Payday, you've mentioned before. Do you think we're seeing more of those nowadays? Do you think there are there's more interest in cooperative games now?
I think as AI gets better, you're starting to see more of that. Although I can't say that the AI in Left 4 Dead or Payday 2 is particularly good. But yeah, you are seeing more of that. You are seeing more of the sort of single multiplayer split, although a lot of them are geared more towards multi or co-op.
And I think a lot of them are online multiplayer, which, is great, I guess, if you either have a network of friends that has the same game or you don't mind playing with strangers. But personally, I like to play with somebody sitting next to me. So I found that it seems like you don't find as many games as you'd like now that we have these gigantic TVs that could do split screen a lot more cleanly.
One video game that I recommend, which is for consoles, is just PS4 exclusive, is Mercenary Kings, which you can play online co-op, but is also couch co-op, and it's sort of Contra style side-scrolling shooter, and it's another one of those where you can play it single player, but when you get more people in, it really starts to shine because you can have different people with different weapons, and so you'll run into one type of enemy and go, okay, you take this guy.
You see that the sort of cheap implementation of co-op a lot. Like I was just playing Splinter Cell Conviction, and there's some areas where it's like it'll be easier with 2 guys, and you can go this way. And there's a sort of a wall there where you can't actually do it unless you have a second player with you. And that's kind of like okay, so you could play it co-op, but it's really more of a single player game, and they're trying to get you to have a co-op partner, but it doesn't really work well either way. So yeah.
Oh, I was just going to mention it. You were talking like Left 4 Dead and some of the other co-ops, and going back a little more old school, it's Serious Sam, just the humor of it, and it just really, it's fun to play by yourself, but it really starts to shine when you get more players, because then you start getting more monsters, and it's just, it goes from a meat grinder into a full-on slaughter fest.
Especially the games that increase the number of enemies, the more players you have playing.
And that's exactly what Serious Sam is, and all of them have been, there's something of a little bit of like competitiveness or like a versus mode, but it really shines when you're playing through the story mission and you're doing it cooperatively, especially when like one person knows, hey, this secret's over here, and another person knows, hey, this secret's over here. Oh, I didn't know that one was there, and you start going back and forth, and it's got a lot of comic aspects to it, and it was just a lot of fun to play with multiple people in like a LAN party type setting when you're sitting there playing with people, you know.
One game that I really enjoyed playing cooperatively with my husband, even though it's a single-player game, but because of the humor, is South Park: The Stick of Truth. And you know, it's an Obsidian game, so maybe I'm biased, but it's a lot of fun. And if you're a fan of the show, it basically feels like you're playing through an episode of the show. And so with humor like that, I feel like I don't necessarily have to be playing it to enjoy it. And the combat does not require a ton of finesse to learn. So it's the kind of thing that's relatively easy to pass off, you know, every once in a while, and then the other person can go make margaritas.
That's sort of pulling a cooperative game together from a single player and a lot of duct tape. I mean, I remember I think the inspiration to Portal 2 was a number of mods that came out for Half-Life 2 and Half-Life 1 where they allowed a co-op game, basically 2 players, to play through the campaign of Half-Life 2, and they did that also. Now I'm blanking on it, but yeah, they did that, and also Oblivion. They did that for Oblivion. They sort of it wasn't designed to be a cooperative experience, and it was sort of hamstringed together, but you could do it.
I think one of my favorite video game co-op experiences is Saints Row, which not very family friendly, but there was a point in Saints Row 4 which me and a friend started playing through where we're escaping a space station and What Is Love comes on the radio, and I start bobbing the ship, and my friend isn't sure if it's the game or me, because the humor is fantastic in that game.
A cooperative video game that I have probably spent way too much time playing has been Monster Hunter, which just sucks your time away, and it's just beautiful that there's all these different classes that each person can find their own little niche that they can go to, because as a friend of mine who's a bowman, I couldn't tell you the first thing about how he does anything that he does. The buttons are just completely different, but he does all the ranged combat. I've got a friend of mine who does all the greatsword cleaving, sport cast, whatever. It's a load of fun.
Probably my number one for same couch. 2-player is great. Video game co-op, Borderlands 2.
Another one in that serious same type of genre.
I was going to say that's even fun if you can get friends on PC and get a Skype call going too. Just hearing their reactions is just priceless.
I do like the vehicles that they design for multiple people too.
It's off of the computer things, but I thought since we're just about out of time, I'd mention the original ancestor to the cooperative somebody turns traitor game is a game called Blackstone Manor, put out by Chill Games a long time back. where one player becomes traitor and works for the bad guy, and they do have a bunch of different bad guys which get a separate set of cards to balance the game, so that the bad guys are individualized.
Interesting.
When they run into it.
Probably not available though.
Probably not available, but if you see it in a used store someplace, worth picking up. And Ancestor do a whole bunch of other games and systems.
What's the name of it again?
Blackstone Manor.
Manor?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're building a house on part of it and the grounds on the other part. The adventurers work on the grounds. Once you get in the house, somebody becomes the monster.
So we're getting about out of time, so maybe if you have anything last things you want to say?
No. I've covered everything I thought of.
Actually, just something just came to mind. If you guys have seen the phenomenon of humans versus zombies on any college campuses or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, a bunch of people go out with Nerf guns. One person is the proto-zombie. It's usually on college campuses and stuff. I actually went to the school that invented it. And if the zombies can touch the human becomes a zombie. The human can like tag somebody with a rolled up sock or a Nerf gun. They get stopped for a little while, and eventually the whole group of humans is turned slowly into zombies. So it starts out as a competitive thing or cooperative thing, and ends up being very competitive. And at the last day, they all go off into the forest, and there's a big face off, and eventually somebody wins and somebody loses. The zombies always pretty much win. Zombies.
I have to add that this game was so popular at the U of M, at least among the science and math crowd, that as the head of a tutoring center, I had to declare a demilitarized zone. Neither humans nor zombies were permitted to be in character on premises.
So if you see people with headbands or things around their arms or legs, you know what they're playing.
No, I think I've said anything. Just it's also there, so many different ways to play with people and against people.
There's a lot more cooperative games now, options, than there were even 10 years ago. A lot more.
I learned a bunch of things to go check out, and that was my goal, so I'm...
And a lot of them will probably be over at Consummate Gaming. So casual pickup for the weekend. And many of them don't actually take much more than, say, an hour, maybe 2. So.
Any other last minute comments from the audience? Going once? Twice? 3 times? I'll let you all out. Thank you.